We're going to be together for a brief time in which I'm hoping to bring you some knowledge to give you an advantage, bring you some real value here. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm joined by my wonderful assistants, Annette Villamar, who will be working the PowerPoint, Michelle Lopez Torres, who will be handling the chat. If you have questions, you could verbalize them after the end of each section. I'll say, hey, if you have questions now, or you can chat them in along the way and we'll try to answer them. Also with a wonderful Ellie here to assist as needed. So thank you so much. A little housekeeping before we get started. We usually like to do this presentation live, and we've been doing it for a couple of years. This is called the Common Deficiencies of Florida Structures. It is about 40 minutes, 45 minutes worth of material plus questions and answers. Had we been giving this live to you, we would have brought you some lunch. So unfortunately, we owe you all a rain check for some food to eat. And hopefully, I look forward to the day that I'll actually once again be able to visit you live and provide some education live and bring you some food and break bread together. So this is a shortened class from a 2-hour CE class we give, but it's packed full of information. Whether you've been selling real estate for 3 months or 30 years, I'm hoping you're going to get some tidbits. Little housekeeping, as I said. Guys, you're important. If you need to use the bathroom, get a drink, take a call, my goodness, golly, if you have a deal coming in on your phone, take it. That's not going to bother me. The only one thing we do ask is that you stay muted while you're working there so that we can be as clear as possible for everybody. So without further ado, let us get going into the common deficiencies of Florida structures. Obviously, we're not going to talk about all deficiencies. We've just picked some very specific ones that we have seen over the years produce problems or issues, things we like to call hurdles. And a big part of this is about seeing those hurdles coming. I'm going to be speaking, and yes, this is my voice. I am the only 52-year-old man who's still going through puberty, so pardon me. From time to time, I will have to take a drink of water. On the screen there, by the way, you probably want to, if you haven't, manipulate your screen so you're kind of got the PowerPoint and you got me, and you can kind of see the two of us there and maybe the chat as well. It takes a little bit of manipulation. I'm not important, you guys are, but just a little bit about me there on the screen. Just some of you don't know me. Been at this 27 years. Last count did about 10,000 inspections. It is my life's work. We got a team of 25 inspectors here. Not sexy, not what I thought I'd be doing. I thought I'd be a real estate developer or something, but this is where I got put, and I've been really enjoyed a nice ride. Like so many things, you may say about this country, of all the things we like and don't like, one of the things that's great is that if you do something long enough and you work really hard at it, sooner or later you become an expert, even if you've made some mistakes along the way. So I've been so blessed to have been able to be at this long enough. You can see I've been on HGTV, CBS, and I get to do some construction. I have a construction background, construction education, so I get to build. And I just love being involved with you guys. Love looking at real estate, renovating real estate, selling real estate, just the total process. So next slide, please, Annette. Next slide. Finally on that. So a couple of goals here. We got a couple of quick goals for this presentation since we are going to be together just a short time. The first one is I want to give you some information so that you can possibly identify some of these deficiencies. When you're at a listing or showing, you're taking a home, you may see something coming your way that's going to be what we call a hurdle coming. Also, really big thing when you're reading about it in an inspection report, that it's not just words on a page, that you can say, hey, and the way I'm going to do that is from time, during this presentation, there's going to be pictures and stuff, but I'm going to also put some actual samples up in the screen, and you're going to be able to look at them. So we're going to do some of that. How we've been together, I would actually pass the samples around. But second goal is I want to provide you with information that's going to give you an advantage in knowledge when you're serving your customers, right? Because that's what it's about, right? I think last time I counted or saw, there's about 32,000 members of the Real Estate Association of Greater Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beaches. You got about another 52,000 south of you guys there down at the Miami Association. So there's a lot of competition. Anything that you can do to give yourself an advantage, to be a better advocate for your client, to make you stand out above the rest, give superior service, and also, make your deals run smoother. So on to the next slide. Who recognizes this? I always like to say show of hands, right? August 24th, 1992. Hurricane Andrew. So there are days, moments in our life, dates in our life that we call like the watershed moments. Maybe the day you graduated school, the day you got married, a child was born, maybe the day you got divorced. This is one of those days for me in my life, August 24th, 1992. But not only that, it's one of those days for Florida real estate. We tend to think of this as an East Coast or Miami or a South Florida event, but it's really a Florida real estate event because it created hurdles. See pictures of hurdles there. And so, and what I mean by that is that it did some things to the work that you guys did. You guys already had a tough job before this. If you were working back then, you already had to obviously find clients, find deals, negotiate deals, worry about underwriting. So now into the mix, get a whole bunch of other things added. But let me just tell you that this day, I was right here. I was a young man, just a little background, young man right out of college, about 25 years old, a couple of years out of college. I was a project manager. I was building a Mercedes-Benz dealership in Coral Gables. And they said, there's a hurricane coming, and it's a big one. I said, okay. I had everything secured on the job site, and I went and I hunkered down in my condo. I bought my first property. It was a little low-rise, dumpy 1950s condo in South Miami. And I said, I'm going to ride this thing out. So I found myself at 5 o'clock in the morning, huddled in fetal position with a battery operator radio listening to Brian Norcross, and like the sound of some sort of an engine roaring outside. Just, no power, the lights were out, I was dark, all alone, terrified. And I'll never forget coming through a window, orange lights, purple lights, reddish lights, this crazy electrical energy. It was like that movie War of the Worlds with all the lights flashing, terrifying. And the wall outlets on both sides of me were whistling because 150-mile-an-hour wind was going up into the soffits of this old building and running around inside of those old walls of that building. And as I was leaning against a corner every so often, I felt the building shake as something flew through the air and then 150-mile-an-hour wind hit the side of the building. And I thought, oh my God, this building could go down. I was absolutely terrified. But fortunately, the building did not go down. Gradually, the winds came down, the sun came up, and that next morning, as it was calm, I opened that back door and I looked out, and everything was on the ground. Every big tree, every little tree, street signs, street lights, power poles. I'll never forget the sight of power lines draped off into the horizon. And it was something I'd never seen before. It was a shopping mall about a mile away called the Bakery Center. And now I can see it from the back of my, oh my God, it's over. We're done, we're finished. Florida real estate is done. South Florida real estate, South Florida construction, we're ruined. Nothing will be the same. Well, obviously I was completely wrong about we're ruined because we weren't ruined. It was a rebirth. Billions of dollars poured in. People moved from down here, down in the south part of the state up to, further north. They moved from Dade to Miramar to Pembroke Pines. They moved over to Naples, Fort Myers. It was an explosion of real estate activity with an infusion of a massive amount of cash. But I was right about one thing. Things did change. Right away, the building code changed. And this is some of those hurdles we're talking about. You guys have a difficult job before. Here come some new hurdles that you guys are still facing today. Building code changed. It's changed 6 times since then. We used to build for 120 miles an hour. Now in the high velocity wind zones around the borders of the state, we build for 180 miles an hour. Everything is strapped and impacted and whatnot. And so, that's why we can hardly sell something new for $300 a foot because of all these augmentations. Second to that, the wind mitigation form. You guys are all too familiar with the wind mitigation report. That was born directly out of this event. It started out 1 page. It's up to 4 pages now. And as you guys know, if that is not filled out a certain way, or if there's not enough credits, it raises the premium and it pushes some of our clients, the ratios off to borrow money. 4-point inspection, it existed, but it was not widely implemented. It became widely implemented after this. And it too used to be 1 page and now it is 4 pages. The 4-point, and I can tell you the #1 call we get outside of booking and inspection is a question on the 4-point, because a 4-point creates hurdles, and we'll talk more about that. Permit searches. We didn't have permit searches. Permit searches were directly born out of this because thousands of contractors came down, pulled thousands of repair permits, and left without closing them. And we're still closing Hurricane Andrew permits to this day. We do a little of that to help out with engineer affidavits. And so Hurricane Andrew has left an indelible mark on your business that you do every day, and it has created hurdles that you have to jump, and we'll get into that. Love this picture. This was can anybody see what it says on the door there? Open house. That is a manufactured home facility, a manufactured home community in South Dade that was just rolled up like a ball of tinfoil. The next photo, the next slide has my favorite picture. I didn't take this picture, it's a very famous picture. Day after Hurricane Andrew from a helicopter. This is a very successful PUD, PUD being a planned urban development in South Dade, West Kendall. Today it has completely recovered, but it was one of the shining stars of Lennar's communities. It's called Country Walk, and at that time there was not a habitable home for about a mile, and you can see it says devastation like never experienced before except in wartime. They did not get electricity in this community for about 8 months, and that's where I got my start. That's where I did my first inspection. I rebuilt a bunch of homes. That's where I saw craziness. I saw independent adjusters working for the insurance companies with big bound checkbooks, handwriting checks, and then I witnessed people, homeowners, turn around and sell their homes on a piece of loose leaf paper for $6,000 as they took their insurance check and got in their car and disappeared. And so it was an interesting time. I hope we never see it again, but all the science that we use today for our building code, much of it came from there. That's where we learned that, you know what? Shingles do not stay on the roof when you use staples in 150 mile an hour wind. Staples will not hold a shingle on a roof at 150 mile an hour wind. Particle board or oriented strand board does not make a good roof decking because when it gets wet, it fails. And so that's where we learned all this stuff. So we're going to dig in now in the next slide. Guys, I'm going to show you some stuff, but by no means do I expect you to become an engineer or architect, home inspector, contractor. You don't want that monkey on your back. You are a super agent, and super agents surround themselves with experts, right? You surround yourself with a roofer who can give you good roofing knowledge, quotes, solve issues, a termite guy who could, do things on an instant for you, hopefully a home inspector, or, all these different people. That's part of your team and your toolbox. So without further ado, the deficiencies. Oh, one last slide here. Here's a hurdle, right? Invaluable knowledge for a super agent, seeing hurdles coming at them, right? Avoiding hurdles, getting rid of the hurdles before you get a contract. The hurdles that you can't get rid of, or at least lowering them, and setting a level of expectation of your seller, if it's your listing about something, is lowering a hurdle. And then we're going to get into that a little more, which brings us to our first deficiency. Spalling, show of hands of who knows what spalling is. Don't see any hands there, okay? I explained to you that we build for 180 miles an hour. The primary way we do that is with reinforced concrete, particularly in our commercial buildings. Concrete is very strong in compression, right? Not strong in tension. You don't see concrete bending very well. So over window openings, over doors, over, like garage openings, wherever there's poured concrete, we use steel. We use reinforcing steel, and that's a rebar that you see sticking out when you go by these job sites. I'm going to show you a sample here of that. And this is a core of concrete, and you can see there's a bar passing through it, a couple of bars passing through it. And as I turn it, you can see the concrete, the steel is in very good condition, right? So concrete has steel in it to help it deal with tension and bending and all those things. We live in a highly corrosive environment. We have 80+% humidity most of the year. It rains over 200 days a year. There's chlorides, which is salt. Corrosive agents in the air, in the soils, in the sand, sometimes in the building materials. That affects that steel. It corrodes that steel. When that steel corrodes, it can cause the concrete to crack and break. And that whole condition of the corroding steel and the breaking concrete is called spalling. It occurs on homes, usually takes at least 20 years, but generally 40 years or more. So we're not talking about the homes from the 1990s and 2000s. And we're talking a lot about condos. It does happen in single family homes, particularly those on the water, but it's especially prevalent in condos. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. It is a structural problem. It's not something you're going to patch and just repair really easily. It does sometimes. And it's a systemic, progressive problem. If you have a little bit of it, you probably have more that you don't see underlying. It's costly. It's about $200 a lineal foot to fix this stuff correctly. So typically as a home inspector, when we find this on a building or doing a commercial inspection or a home inspection, we'll recommend trade estimates. We won't put an order of magnitude to this because we don't want to scare somebody, because we don't really know. We can kind of estimate the cost, but it's going to, could be a big number. So that goes against what the purpose of us giving order of magnitude estimates would be. Brings us to the next slide. So here's a couple of good pictures here. And actually, as you're looking at that, I'm going to show you. This was a beam of a building. You can see the edge of it here. There was cracks on both sides. When the piece fell out, this was the corner of a beam over like a carpet. When a piece fell out, the steel was literally a stain. There was almost no steel left in it. You can see that. It's just reduced to nothing. This was a 1940s building, so this was a pretty old building. But here's a 1960s building. A little newer. You can see the stucco here. This was a wall with a column. And again, there was cracks all the way around. When the piece fell out, the steel was literally a stain. There was almost nothing left. And the picture on the screen shows you the bottom of some walk-up stairs to a very typical type of walk-up condominium. And then, of course, the one picture here, the picture on this side is this is a parking deck. Like the first floor of a condominium building where you would park your car. This is the overhead slab from the floor above. Those generally aren't painted. And what happened over time, humidity, vapor got in, corroded the steel, and it just literally fell like on the cars and everything. So this is kind of a common thing. Next slide, please. Just gives you a little illustration of what happens to the steel. It expands. When it corrodes, it expands and breaks the concrete. And the next slide, I think, is okay. So here's a fairly typical two different residential scenarios. This side is like a 1950s ranch, and you can see over the window. That's where the steel is, over openings. Guys, we're not talking about concrete block and stucco walls where you have little hairline stair-stepping cracks. All concrete block gets little cracks from expansion, contraction, maybe a little bit of differential movement. We're talking about a very unnatural looking jagged crack. You can see this big jagged crack up here over a window. Okay, this is the 50s. This is the 1930s, 20s building. This would be, like some of those old Pompano buildings, maybe going up to Boca, some of the Meisner buildings. Obviously, you don't need to be an expert to tell you got an issue here. The concrete's literally falling off, but you can see where the bar goes over the window. So that's falling in a residential setting, but here's where we see the pain. Here's where we see the loss of goodwill for the agents. Who's seen this? Right? I'm sure you know what this is now, right? Okay. Condominiums, concrete restoration on condominiums. We had a condominium boom in the 1970s, particularly in Pompano, Boca, Gulf Ocean Mile. Most of those buildings along the Gulf Ocean Mile were all built in the 70s. Lots of horizontal surface balconies. Concrete restoration is a billion-dollar industry. And so along with concrete restoration in a condominium setting comes what? Special assessments, right? So here's where the pain comes in, and I'll tell you a story. Tell you a couple stories. First one I'm gonna tell you, agent sold a modest condominium to a client. The client moves in and is very happy living in the condo, and 6 or 7 months goes by, and the client gets a letter in the mail. And the client opens the letter, and it's a letter, opens the envelope, and it's a letter from the association informing her that she has been levied a special assessment, $327 a month for 24 months. She's shocked. She didn't know anything was coming. The building looks fine. What's going on? She goes over to the neighbor. Knock, knock, knock. Neighbor opens the door. She goes, "Did you get this letter? Can you believe this? I can't believe it. I just can't believe it." So what does the neighbor say to her? "We all knew it was coming." You see, they had been talking about it. They had known about it. but nobody disclosed it to her, right? So who do you think the first person she called was? That's right, she called her agent. No, it's not the agent's responsibility or the agent's fault, but we're all in the goodwill business, right? We're advocates. When we ask for those condo docs, the recommendation is to ask a very simple question. Tell me what's going on with the concrete. Now, we're not talking about for 1990 buildings or, you know, year 2000 buildings. 1980 and older would be what I would recommend. 1980 and older. And I'm going to tell you why. Because a 1980 building, I mean, you can even extend it to 85, but say 85. But a 1980 building is now 40 years old. It's hard to believe it's 40 years old. And in Broward County, there is an ordinance that requires all commercial buildings to be structurally inspected 40 years and every 10 years thereafter. This ordinance is driving a lot of concrete restoration. That's one thing driving the concrete restoration. They're having to get this inspection. The inspection is finding the concrete decay and requiring repairs, and they're forced to do it, and they're forced to bring special assessments. The second thing driving it is that the reserves, we reserve for paint, okay? So, you know, they paint every 7 to 10 years. The state recognizes 7-year life of paint on a condo, but 7 to 10 years. So that means when they go to paint, they generally have to fix concrete. So that drives it as well. In the state of Florida, the Florida Condominium Act only requires reserves for 3 things and possibly a 4th. Roof, pavement, and paint are required. Roof, pavement, paint. Possibly plumbing, okay? Those are the 3 things and possible 4th thing that's statutorily required. Truth be told, the board can waive those. Your condominium board can waive those, and we saw that in a downturn. They waived a lot of it because they didn't have the money, they had delinquencies. So nowhere is there a concrete restoration reserve. Now we do see, because we do reserve studies, we do see associations now making a general reserve, and they're using that to reserve money for these type of things. So moving the pictures on down, I'm going to show you a little more here. Sometimes this decay goes into the unit from the balcony on in, and that's what that picture is there. Or sometimes the whole corner has to be rebuilt, right? And this is very labor-intensive work. There's no way to really mechanize this. It's hand chipping, and you can see that looks like that piece I showed you a minute ago, that from the wall coming out. You can see these guys are chipping it. So case study, I'm going to give you a good case study here. My own mother's condominium. My mother lives in Pompano Beach. She lives at 405 Ocean Boulevard in the Parliament House. She's been there 25 years. 3rd special assessment in 25 years related to concrete restoration. 3rd one. Every 7-8 years they paint. Here we are, right on the numbers. This one's over $4,000 again. It's a lot of money, actually, way more than $4,000. Building's beautifully kept, but the way that we present this is not that it's a problem, but that we live in paradise. And it's just a cost of living in paradise. These buildings are on the water and those things. So moving on to the next screen here. What am I recommending here? Obviously, if you guys are looking at, you're taking a listing of a residence, a single family home, or you're showing them these issues, this concrete decay does exist for the older homes or on and around the water especially, but really where the pain that I see you guys experience and the hurdles is with the condos. When you're working as an advocate on your client, they're buying a condo, you go ask for those condominium documents, you need to ask about a concrete restoration assessment. You can ask about an assessment in general. You can ask about the reserves, obviously, but particularly concrete restoration, because that is the big painful one. And you can do it in writing. Send them an email, get it done. The professional management companies are all over this. They know all about it. The concrete restoration companies host huge exhibits in all of these association meetings, all these management meetings. They're all together. It's a big business. It's well known. Ask the questions. Be an advocate for your client. Preserve your goodwill, because when this comes up and it's not known, it is a goodwill killer. So that is it on Spalling. I welcome anyone on the line to share a question regarding Spalling or a comment or anything. I'll break it this time for a couple of seconds to see if anybody's got anything. Good, no one. All right, well, we will move on down. You can always come back. The next deficiency we're going to talk about, again, because we're only talking about specific things where the pain is occurring, is wood destroying organisms. And now I know this is something that many of you know a lot about, right? Termites and whatnot. We got a saying that we like to have, shown on the next slide. 2 types of homes in Florida, those that have termites and those that will have termites. We live in the subtropics. There are 2 major types of termites, 26 subtypes. There's a lot of termites here, and it's just South Florida. It's not a big deal. However, we get a lot of clients coming from up north, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island. Termites seem to be a big deal, and we find ourselves having to counsel them and try to keep them emotionally, without falling into like an emotional crater over termites. That's just part of Florida, where they're treatable and we deal with them, and that's the way we go about it. But in all actuality, interesting for you to know that a home inspector is not licensed to do a termite inspection. That's right, a home inspector cannot do a termite inspection in the state of Florida. You have to have a termite license as a pest control operator. It's a completely separate license. It's from the Department of Agriculture. It's not even from the Department of Professional Regulation. Home inspector's license from the Department of Professional Regulation does not cover this. And quite frankly, the home inspector's license don't have an arm that will reprimand. They don't have a lot of management. Whereas a termite license is a different story. The Department of Agriculture is very serious. If you have a termite complaint, you can file it with them and they will follow up on it. They have people in all the different areas that we are supposed to perform those inspections as a licensed pest operator very specifically, and they will investigate any complaints. So for you to know that. But we're supposed to write this termite report on a specific form, which many of you know all too well. And we're actually supposed to report on 4 things: drywood termites, subterranean termites, Polybutylene beetles, and old house borers. And I'm not going to get into entomology, but just know there's about 6 types of beetles. And then the last thing is wood decaying fungi, which is rot. I'm not going to talk to you about rot. I think you guys know what rot is, right? We're going to talk about the other things here. As I mentioned before, you have to have a pest control license to do a termite inspection and write a report for a real estate transaction. And that is why you see a lot of pest control companies coming out. You'll see a home inspector bring a pest control guy because the home inspector doesn't have that license. We got that license many years ago. I'm not shilling here, but we got that license because we felt like it wasn't unbiased. We used to bring pest control companies. They would come and they were there to try to sell stuff. So we got the license and trained our people, and we continue to train them and have them do these so that it's unbiased. But many pest control companies do a good job. So I'm not talking disparaging about that. Moving on to the first one of these insects that we're going to talk about. We're talking about drywood termites. Drywood termites are the most common termites. All right. I'm going to show you something here. This was a truss. Now flip it over. Drywood termites eat the wood very cleanly. If you look, they've actually hollowed this wood out and left it cleanly eaten. They ate what we call gallers. And you can see I can actually carry this thing with like one finger. It's like weighs like an ounce now. But what they do additionally is they drop fecal matter. They drop pellets that we call frass. If you look in the pictures, you can see the pellets. And the pellets can be white or light brown, like beige rather, like a white, or they could be almost black, dark brown black, or they can be in between. And if we were together, I would be passing all this termite poop around to you. Aren't you glad? Aren't you so sad that we're not together for me to pass this termite poop around to you? I know that kind of gross everyone. So, okay, so I just said termite frass or pellets can be any range of colors, from white to black, basically, almost. What does that mean to you? It means absolutely nothing. Do not let a pest control guy or an inspector or anyone tell you, hey, I can tell it's recent because of the color, because it's light. We don't know that. We're not entomologists, and quite frankly, we don't even know what that depends on. The type of wood they're eating, the species of termite, the colony itself. We don't know that. But what we do know is this stuff, this frass or this fecal matter, lasts a really long time. We see it in attics. Nobody vacuums their attics, so it lasts up there. We've inspected a home, and 7, 8, 10 years later, we come back and inspect it, and we got pictures, and we look at the pictures, and man, the piles of termite frass look about the same. The stuff's been there. We didn't find any live termites, It looks like it's been there. It is hard and dry, it lasts a long time. But what you guys need to know as a super agent is that if you're looking at a listing and you see this, like termite frass around a door frame, around a baseboard, around, can you go back to the other slide, please? Or, you know, shows the color variation. If you see this in areas of a home that is maintained, there's probably a live infestation, because what's happening is the termites are eating and they're pushing it out of the galleries, and the homeowner or the housekeeper is cleaning up and they're pushing it out and is cleaning up. So if you see that, what do you think we're going to see? That's right. Here comes a hurdle, right? We're going to be writing in a report that we found evidence of termites. We may dig in there and find a live termite. So that's a hurdle. When you see that, super agent light should go off in your mind. Ding, 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 ding. This is a hurdle. I got to talk to my client. I got to do something potentially about this hurdle before the house is under contract, right? I can wait, but then I'm going to deal with it on a report. And you're going to deal with the emotional situation that comes with it being on a report, despite the home inspector doing the best job he can to not make a big deal or, you know, just explain what it is. You got to deal with it. What's really great is when we come to a house and maybe we find some evidence and we mention it to the listing agent says, oh, yeah, here you go. It was treated and here's the guarantee. So now the hurdle has been removed. Not only has a hurdle been removed, but it's been replaced with bonus added. So instead of us explaining to the client here that there's evidence of termites and we're going to recommend treatment at home, we're explaining here that, guess what? The home has been treated for termites and there's a guarantee. So you see how that whole momentum shift can occur? So be on the lookout for that. Again, here's some pictures here along the baseboards, reddish brown or black. Windowsills, guys. People don't clean their windowsills as much because they have window treatments. You'll find a lot of them there. You've taken your listing. I'm not telling you how to do your business. Taking your listing, you're doing a walk around anyway. Keep your eyes open. And this is what I offer you guys. If you see something, snap a picture of it. Everybody's got one of these. You can send it to me. You can send it to us. I recommend that you get your experts, if you don't have them, your termite guy that you trust, that you can send it to, and in a second, he'll type back, no, that's ants. He'll type back and say, it looks like drywood termite frass. I could be there in the morning to look at it, and we can see about a spot treatment. Something like that. So, you know, use your phone, snap it. I offer you, see it for me. By the way, at this point, I want to say something I failed to say so far. I welcome you to take as many notes as you want, but you need to know that you're going to get this PowerPoint, and you're going to get something called the Super Agents Field Guide. We're going to send you a field guide that has all these pictures and has it shortened down, where you can literally have it on your phone, and you can look. Like as we get into this, we're gonna have other deficiencies like electrical panels and things that cause issues that you're gonna be able to just look and say, oh yeah, that looks like it. So take notes, but please know you're gonna get that. Okay, if you see this in a house, any of these pictures, you most likely have a live infestation. Termites swarm between March and about November, and I won't get into all the science behind that, but they swarm, that's how they reproduce. They drop their little wings. Male and a female get together, drop the wings, and they start a colony. Termites do not come over in mass. People always say this to me, oh my God, my neighbor's tenting his house. I'm afraid they're gonna come to my house. Termites do not invade your house like the Russian army, 600 at a time, you know, come over. They come over a male and a female, drop their wings, they start a colony. It takes 5 years from that point for them to do enough damage for me to come and find it. That's right. If you find evidence of termites in a house, frass, it generally takes 5 years they've been there, or they came in on a piece of building material that they were there for 5 years. So wings means they've dropped the wings and they're making colonies. If you find the bodies, that just means that they got dried out by the air conditioning system and they didn't get to make the colonies yet. Those guys, at least. Still means you'll have active infestation. And not that I expect you to know this, but look at this guy. He's brownish red. He's got these wings twice as long as the body. They line up. That is a termite, guys. That's what termites look like. On the next slide, that's a drywood termite. These are the subterraneans. Again, I'm just telling you this. I don't expect you to be an entomologist. Subterraneans are a little smaller, black with a white cloudy wing, but they do swarm. You see, here's a swarm. So they'll do the same thing. Again, if you take a picture of that, share it with your guy, tell you that's subterranean termite. It's going to be tough for you guys to find subterranean termites, okay? Drywood termites drop the pellets of frass. These guys do not. Subterraneans come from the ground. They use that poop to make these mud tubes. And the mud tubes, they travel through the mud tubes up in the walls. And you can see it on the next slide. So we find these, as inspectors, we find these mud tubes under the building in the attic. They'll come up behind the drywall. Nobody will see them. And then we'll see this mud on the trusses in the attic. And that's how we know you got them. So a little harder to find. Brings us to the next slide. Now this shows us the difference between an ant and a termite. Basically, an ant has a segmented body, like with a thorax. Termites have a straight body. And this is usually when I share this, I'm gonna do my best. I usually like to pass this around, but here's an actual lucite sample board that shows, I don't know how good you guys can see that. Ants versus termites. Ants with a segmented body, termites with a straight body. All the wings are the same length. And again, your best advice is snap a picture, send it. Let's talk a little bit about treatment before we go on to powder post beetles. So guys, I'm gonna tell you, we give order of magnitude cost estimates. I know some agents like cost estimates, some don't, but we give order of magnitude. And what that means is that's around the price, basically, from our knowledge, from our trade knowledge and having contractors license those things. For termites, we use $1 a foot, and that's what I recommend you guys. That is a really general number. There's a lot more that goes into figuring how much it costs to treat than that, but that's a very general number. That's gonna be a good order of magnitude number. So if you got a 2,000 square foot ranch, 2,000 total, not adjusted, we're talking total foot, a buck a foot's $2,000. It may be $2,300 with Orkin. It may be, $1,800 with somebody else. That's about it. And so you guys, I know you guys understand that the proven effective treatment for drywood termites is tent fumigation. That is correct. It is 100% effective if done correctly. Put the gas, it kills everything. But you guys, I want you guys to understand there's pros and cons. And this is good information because you're gonna come across a client who doesn't want to tent their home. And that might be just what the deal it takes for them to say, you know what, let's put this whole thing on freeze. And I've seen it. Somebody who was handicapped or elderly, or they just didn't want to deal with it. They had pets and things like that. So tent fumigation is the proven effective method for drywood termites, but that is the pro. The pro is if you do it right, it kills everything, but it has cons. The cons are that the person living in it needs to move out and they need to take their pets with them. They need to take their medicine and they need to take unsealed foods that are not canned and whatnot. Not only that, when they tent, they will break roof tiles. They're walking on the roof with heavy tarps, and it's not uncommon. I mean, we do an inspection, we find 50 broken tiles, and the seller is dumbfounded. He's like, the roof's only 2 years old. Then he remembers that he tented it and they broke tiles. And so they will break roof tiles. We'll also kill plants that are under the overhang, because the tent comes straight down. If there's a plant under the overhang, it's gonna be inside the gas and it's gonna die. And then the last thing is, if there's a screen enclosure, they have to detach the screen enclosure. And then when it's done, it has to be reattached, and that costs added money and headache. So there's other means. There are some homes that are candidates for a local liquid or whole house liquid treatment. That's a pesticide, a liquid pesticide that's sprayed or wiped on the wood or injected into the wood. And it works under certain conditions. Not every house is a candidate for it, right? And it has pros and cons. The con is, it only has one con as far as I know. The con is it is not fully effective. It only works for the wood that you treat. Unlike tenting, which, you're able to treat the whole house. But the pros are that you don't have to move out. You don't have to take your food, your pets, your medicine. They're not gonna kill plants, they're not gonna break roof tiles, and you don't need to detach the screen enclosure. So if they can get to the wood and treat it, it's a good option. So a good home for a liquid termite treatment would be like a 1995 house, with a slab on grade, with metal stud interior walls. Really the only wood in that house is the trusses, maybe the fascia, and some doors and baseboard. They can get to all wood. A bad candidate for that house will be like a 1947 home with a wood crawl space where you crawl under it, with very low attic access, all the interior walls are wood frame. It's going to be hard to treat all the wood and get to the termites. And pest control companies are going to be reluctant to give you a guarantee probably for that termite treatment. So that's typically not a good candidate. But have this information and know what $1 a foot treatment, and know that you have options for that client. By the way, $1 a foot is also a good number for subterranean treatment. Subterranean treatment is a different treatment than treat the ground. There are much more expensive treatments for subterranean you can get. There's baiting systems and things like that. But I like to tell people about $1 a foot to start for general subterranean termite treatment. So that brings us into powder post beetles. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you a good story about termites. This is a story about termites and tenting. I was doing an inspection many years ago, and I was probing it, and I found, the wood around the edge of the roof, the fascia, and I found some damage. And when I went up there and I looked at it very gently, there was termites in there, and a couple of termites came out, and they were in my hand, DRYWOOD termites, and I showed them to the buyer, and the seller was in. The seller saw them too and said, look, there's some DRYWOOD, there's a DRYWOOD termite colony here. You may be able to locally treat it. It's not a big deal, but should be addressed. Anyway, the seller went in the house. I went about my business. I went on the roof. I'm doing the inspection. And about 30 minutes later, an Orkin truck pulls up in the driveway. And the Orkin man gets out, and he's walking towards my ladder. And just then, out of the house, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the seller and the listing agent come out, and they're walking towards my ladder. And here comes the buyer and the buyer's agent, and they're walking towards me. I said, I better get off the roof. Something's happening. So I get down from my ladder, and the seller gets to me first, and the seller says, we just treated the house for DRYWOOD termites last week. As a matter of fact, the tent came off yesterday. Therefore, it is impossible that you found live termites. You must have brought those live termites with you. Holy cow, I'm being blamed for bringing live termites. Oh my God. But before I can say anything, thank God, the Orkin guy goes, wait. That is not how it works. Everybody's looking at him. Says, the Vicane gas that we use to fumigate the house does not kill the termites. Huh? Why the heck would you fumigate them? He says, the Vicane gas kills the protozoa in the termite's stomach that digests the cellulose in the wood. It takes a week and up to 2 weeks for the termites to die, and that's why you found live termites. Woo! Wow, I escaped that one, but that was great information. I wrote that in the report. The deal closed, everything went forward. The buyer was happy. The buyer had a guarantee. So that pointed out it's absolutely possible for you guys to have an inspection done on a house you're doing a deal with. They find live termites, and the house was recently treated. Be aware of that, put that in your toolbox for the off occurrence that occurs. Brings us to powder post beetles. Powder post beetles, like termites, eat wood. They eat trusses. That's a picture of a truss. The difference is they don't drop the frass, they drop powder. We're talking about fine powder, guys. Anywhere from a white to an orange, white to dark orange, all different colors in that range, whitish, beige, dark orange. They love antiques. They'll eat trusses, they'll eat structural members, but we find them a lot in antiques. As a matter of fact, I have a sample here that if you were with us, I would be able to pass around. I'm going to show you this very fine powder in here is actually from a bamboo piece of furniture, right? And so, story goes on that. One of our inspectors was doing an inspection. He saw some powder under this furniture. He bent over, he was looking at it. The seller said, what are you looking at? He said, there's some powder here. It looks like you have a powder post beetle infestation in this piece of furniture. Seller said, what do I do about it? He said, well, I don't see it anywhere else in the house. Maybe you can get this piece of furniture out of here, maybe have it treated. Before my inspector could even finish the conversation, the seller had grabbed that thing and thrown it off the balcony, and it crashed down a couple of floors and broke to pieces. And that's how I got this sample. So typically they could be in, if you look at the next slide, we find them in furniture a lot. Here's like a breakfast that got moved away from the wall, and you can see this white powder. And then, of course, the other one that's in a table. And the first time I found them in a table, and I thought the seller had dropped like makeup. That's how fine this powder is, guys. It is a fine powder. So be on the lookout. When you're doing your walk around, look for unusual powder under furniture and whatnot. Powder post beetles. Bad news with powder post beetles, 2 to 3 times the cost to treat. If it's in structural wood and they need to fumigate, because they do fumigate as part of it, if it's, if it's not a piece of furniture they can remove, it's a big expense. So if it's in furniture, little tip, you want to get rid of that, that hurdle, get that furniture out of there. So that's a tidbit on that. Holes for the powder post, you're not going to, I mean, they're hard to find. We find them, but because there's 6 different types, the holes can be teeny tiny pinholes like this dot next to the dime, all the way to the 3/8 of an inch hole you see right here. So, again, we're not going to go over entomology, but they make all kinds of random holes. All right, I already told you guys about $1 a foot to treat termites. Of course, get a trade estimate when you can. Powder post beetles, 2 to 3 times that cost as well. And then the last slide, summarizing this, guys, ask, right? You're going to ask for the disclosure. You're going to, when you put it on a disclosure, if it's your listing, if you're the buyer, you're going to look for a disclosure. Ask about it. Do a walk around when you're taking that listing. Look for it. Get ahead of it before I show up and it ends up on a report. Any questions on termites at this point? All right, no questions? Moving right along, electrical. We're not going to talk about everything electrical. We'll be here all day just talking about electrical. We're going to talk about the things that are causing pain, holding up your deals. Those are the things on the 4-point, right? So I know you guys, as I guarantee there's several of you that have had pain as a result of the 4-point with electrical, right? 2 things, wiring and panels. Wiring, we're going to start with wiring. Up until the 1940s, we use a cloth-covered wiring. See what it looks like. You can see how tattered that is. You can understand why the insurance companies have an issue with this. It gets all brittle. It's about 100 years old at this point. When they take it out of the wall to replace a fixture and they push it back in, the wires touch, they short, they cause fires. That is a lowdown on this cloth-covered wiring. I'm going to be honest with you, most of it's replaced, guys, but we do go into homes where they say they replaced it all, and they haven't. It still exists, from light switches to maybe a ceiling fixture in a couple of rooms, or maybe they have flat ceilings and they have a hard, the electrician couldn't get to it. So then we're in the situation where we got to check cloth wiring because there's a little bit of cloth wiring. So we try to avoid that, so we don't screw the deals up, but ask about it. 1920s, 30s, 40s home, it had cloth wiring. You want to get in front of that, right? Advance the slides, please. Here's a picture that shows exactly what I'm talking about, where they push the fixture back up, the wires touch, cause the fire. This is how it runs through the attics, guys, in that knob and what they call knob and tube fashion, right? If the old McNabb house that they relocated off Atlantic Boulevard there sure had this knob and tube wiring running through it. Here's just some more pictures, shows how tattered this stuff gets. So today we cover, since about 1940, late 1940s, we cover our wires with vinyl, with like rubber. There's been several iterations of it, but the bottom line is we cover with rubber. Next slide shows something. Here's where I see pain, guys, okay? This looks like cloth-covered wire, right? You see the tattered cloth. You look here, it looks like there's a cloth over here. But if you look closely, there's vinyl. There's rubber over that wire, right? There's rubber. So the outside of the wiring has a cloth-covered sheath. The inside of the wiring has got rubber. Home inspectors who don't know what they're doing are blowing up deals. They're writing cloth-covered wiring. And you can see why. Here's a sample I'll show you. This is, look how tattered that is, right? It's all beat up if you just saw that. But when you get to the end and you look at it, look at that, red, white, and black rubber covered wire. You got to know what you're looking for. And I was given this class, and a gentleman was in the back, and he was flipping through like an iPad, and he flipped it around. He said, "What is this?" And I looked at it, and it looked just, I said, "That looks like rubber covered wiring with a cloth sheathing." What year is the home? He said 1954. I go, probably is. Yeah, well, they want like a $14,000 credit. I said, you're about to be a hero. Go get an electrician. So that's the point I'm making to you guys. If you are selling a home or looking at a home, I'm going to draw a line in the sand at 1950. If that home is 1950 or newer, and you receive a report saying you have cloth covered wiring, you need to get a second opinion. You need to get an electrician out there and make sure it's not this. And be careful, because the electrician will say, yeah, there's some cloth there. No. Is it rubber covered wire? Because this is not what the insurance company's concerned about. They're concerned about the other one, right? Because this is all, by the way, this is all insurance driven, guys. Nobody's going to come, the building officials, code enforcers, they're not going to come into the house and say, hey, I heard you have cloth covered wiring here. You need to rewire this house. No. This is insurance related. If cloth covered wiring gets on the 4-point, your buyer may have difficulty getting insurance. Most A-rated insurance companies won't cover that. If they do cover it, it's a big premium or some time constraint. So be on the lookout for this rubber covered wiring, improperly labeled as cloth, 1950 or newer. Know that. You'll save your client a lot of headaches. Next. Okay, here we go, guys. If you get nothing else from this 50 minutes together today, remember these 5 names. Again, this is going to be on the Super Agents Field Guide. Sylvania, Stablock, Zinsco, Federal Pacific. Those are the 5 panel manufacturers that are not accepted by any A-rated insurance carriers. From time to time, carriers step in and out. A whole bunch of surplus line carriers. I heard Old Iron Shore will write it. But most of them, if those get on a 4-point, it's a showstopper. Some of them will give you 60 days, 30 days, 90 days. Some of them will jack the premium up. So as you go through, I'm going to show you some pictures, and these are going to be on the field guide. You're doing your walkthrough. You've already looked at the outside. You've walked around and looked for the pellet, fecal matter. You get to the garage. Now you're looking at the panel. Next slide. Zinsco. It's written right here on a metal tab. You see Zinsco, you know your buyer's probably going to have trouble getting insurance. Next slide. Federal Pacific. Guys, this is on the outside. You don't even need to open the panel up. It's right there. You just walk by. Man, are you going to impress your client? Tell them, hey, Well, by the way, what typically happens is we tell them, hey, Mr. Seller, you got a Federal Pacific panel. This panel has been known to be difficult for some insurance carriers to write insurance for. I just want you to know that. We don't tell them the panel's got to be replaced, because again, no one's going to make you replace this panel. In other words, a code enforcement is not going to come in. This is all insurance driven, right? So they typically say to us, you know what, I've lived here 30 years and I've not had a problem with that panel. And I say, you know what, Mr. Seller, you're right. You may live here another 30 years and never have a problem, but your buyer is probably going to need insurance, and the insurance company may not write it because these panels have had a history of problems, such as fires melting the breakers. So, you may want to, if they say, thank you for letting me know, then at least we've set their level of expectation that they may have an issue when the buyer comes. Some of them say to us, you know what, I'm calling my electrician, I'm getting it out of here. I don't want anything to come in between my good sale and the goodwill of the client. It's $1,500, I'm going to replace it, done. So, next slide. Challenger on a paper tag on the inside. By the way, Zinsco, Federal Pacific, those are the 60s, late 50s, 60s. This is the 90s and up into 2000. Challenger is in a lot of the planned urban developments, the PUDs, okay? West Broward planned urban developments. You will see Challenger. It's been a problem about 5 years now. Next. Okay, so this is Stablock, and it also says Federal Pacific down here. So they kind of became the same company, Stablock, Federal Pacific. Next slide. Sylvania, Zinsco. You could have Sylvania, or you could have Zinsco, or you could have Sylvania, Zinsco together. Same thing. The companies became one. And people ask me, so why do all these panels have problems? They have problems because of aluminum. These breakers have aluminum in them, and aluminum connections. The heating occurs, spacing, arcing. That's what shows on this breaker. Next slide. Shows the inside of the box where the breaker is actually melted to the bar, right? And then the next one, same thing, shows a Zinsco panel where the breaker melted to the bar. And then this last slide is Challenger. Challenger had a slightly different problem. This little turning bar right here actually burns up. So that's it on electrical. These are a problem because they're on a 4-point, right? So what I'm recommending is you ask up front about electrical upgrades. Many of the people know that. It's always great info. I'm telling you, you can look at the panel, guys. You're walking through this house, snap a picture, whatever. If you have any questions, look at the field guide, look at that panel. And the last thing is align yourself with insurance professionals who can provide outside the box solutions, right? Getting a policy that gives you 30, 60 days to replace a panel, or getting a policy that takes another policy out. There's guys who are doing creative things. That's been the solution we've seen. Because too often, this panel will be in the home, we'll find it, and will be in a report. Something will be negotiated monetarily, but then we get 45 days down the road, 60 days, we come to closing, and that panel's still in the house and it's still on the report. And then we get a call, thanks for finding that, can you take that panel off the report? Really hard for us to take it off the report. That's an affidavit. That 4 points an actual affidavit that we sign and attest to. So that's in there, and we can't change our reports. So that's it. Any questions on electrical? Question from Abraham about whether or not in a condo they would need to be replaced. That depends on the insurance carrier. Again, I just told you it's insurance related. Some of these condo insurance policies don't ask. They don't ask about that, right? If they require a 4-point, it may need to be replaced. I have not personally seen 27 years where they have people replacing panels in condominiums, although there are a lot of Zinsco panels in the condominiums, okay? I hope that answered your question. Okay, any further? No further questions? We're gonna move into plumbing. This is the last section, guys. You've been patient. I wanna get you out of here on time. We're timing. Again, we're not gonna talk about everything plumbing. We're only gonna talk about the piping, because the piping causes the problems on the 4-point, right? And we start with the supply piping. Up until about 1965, we used galvanized steel, super heavy threaded steel, right? The problem is that it looks like this when it goes in, and it has a 50-year life expectancy, and after 50 years, it looks like this, right? All corroded. So it corrodes inside and out. Phantom leaks, reduced pressure, you've seen rust under fixtures and things. That's from this galvanized piping. I'm gonna be honest with you, most of it's been replaced. Again, we're talking about homes from the 50s, generally and older, and we're already, 70 years old. So most of it, there is a little bit left out there. You got to be on the lookout for it. These homes from the 50s and older, primarily. It can creep up into the early 60s, but that's a good picture that shows how it corrodes inside and reduces the pressure. After that, we went to copper. You can see there's a picture of copper here. Oh, by the way, this is what we see, like dripping on this pipe and stuff. Here's the copper. This is a repair in copper, but they left the old galvanized. So now we got both on the 4-point, copper and galvanized. Sometimes that doesn't work too good. Copper's great, and we use a lot of copper to today. The problem with copper is it's a precious metal. It's very expensive. So somebody said, you know what? Plumbing's not sexy. We can't get $20 a square foot more because we use copper piping. We need to come up with a pipe that's plastic and cheap, and that cheap labor, we don't need that. We don't want to have expensive plumbers. We want laborers cut it and snap it together. So they came up with a pipe of the future, polybutylene. Now I punch you shaking your heads there. Yeah, polybutylene. It's shown there. I'm going to show you a picture of it here with the telltale copper, the gray pipe with the copper fittings. 78 to 1995, guys. 1978 to 1995, primarily in the PUDs, in the planned urban developments, right? Ask the question. Know the communities, right? We know a lot of the communities that they're in, and we look for it. It's over 20 years old at this point. And what I'll tell the buyers is, guys, you have polybutylene. It was a subject of a class action lawsuit because of leakage at the fittings, but this piping in this home is over 20 years old. It hasn't leaked. It may never leak. It may never leak. But the problem is the buyers go home, they Google this big long word polybutylene, and they get hundreds of pages of horror stories. And if polybutylene ends up on a 4-point, it's almost certainly a deal killer. Again, I heard Old Iron Shore is writing it, but most won't touch it. And quite frankly, it just has a stigma. I see when we find this, things get edgy. Deals tend to kind of like get dicey, and the seller doesn't want to credit, the buyer doesn't want to deal with it. So probably a good thing to know before you spend a whole bunch of money marketing a home is if you have polybutylene, right? So hopefully the seller discloses it, because what's happened is most of it's been replaced. But the rest of the people either didn't know they had it, or they gave a credit and it just kind of seller to next seller to buyer to seller. And we're seeing, 4 or 5 generations later. Here's a good, it could be a bluish gray, it could be a dark gray, it could be a light gray, but the key thing is the telltale copper connections, right? Repiping is pretty much the fix. There's a few other little shark bite fixes and things like that, but for the most part, it's a repipe situation to satisfy the insurance company. So, and I'm sure many of you have had horror stories with this already because you're in an area of high polybutylene. Brings us to the last thing as we close out, guys. Cast iron sanitary piping. Up until 1973, we used a steel pipe called cast iron to drain the wastewater, and it worked on gravity, right? It worked on the slope. The problem is, over 50 years of water running through the bottom, what happens? The bottom rots out, right? So we see that going on now, 73 and older. If it's this situation here where you have a crawl space, it's not that big a deal, right? A plumber could climb under there, a couple of $1,000 bucks, he could repipe it. Where it becomes more of a big deal is a slab on grade situation, right? And you can see here, shows the bottom rotted out. 50-year life expectancy, 60 years maybe. We're now approaching 70, 80, things like that. So it's we find it. Sewer camera inspectors are now becoming part of a big home inspection. You want to be an advocate for your client. The sweet spot is 1960 to 1972, guys. You're selling houses along Bayview Drive, 1967 ranch homes over there in Lake Estates or Imperial Point, some of those homes in there, north up through Pompano. Anything 60 to 72 is especially vulnerable. We recommend a sewer camera inspection. I'm going to end on a story. 2 quick ones real quick. The reason why this kind of is blown up, an agent that we do work for years ago said she sold a home. She was in public Saturday morning. She saw a client coming towards her that she'd sold the home 2 months before. And oh my God, how are you? Hug and kiss. How are the kids? How's Jim? How's the house? Well, the house isn't real good. We're not living in it. It's all cut up. We have to repipe it. It's going to cost like $100,000. She said she felt terrible. She wasn't being blamed for it, but it was not that nice, warm 3.7 referral feeling of goodwill going forward. She said, John, from now on, I want a sewer camera inspection on every house. I said, take it easy. That's ridiculous. You don't need a sewer camera inspection on every house. Just, when we do the home inspection, we'll tell you if the home falls in the range. Do it older than 1973. So that was a horror story that she had. And the last thing I want to share with you is a story. I think there's good value in this for your toolbox. And it's about a home that we inspected. Now we're going back over 10 years. It was about a $500,000 ranch home. The sellers were empty nesters moving on. The buyers were 40-something with adolescent children, and they were buying for the neighborhood. They wanted the schools, and we heard them talking. They were going to put impact windows in, and they were going to redo the floors, and the home was fairly original but nice. So we, as we were doing the inspection, behind the laundry equipment, behind the washer, dryer, hamper areas, we found water stains that were kind of concealed, and they were wet. We ascertained with moisture meters that it appeared that they had cast iron piping, and it appeared it was leaking up into the walls. So we told them, at the time we did not do sewer camera, we recommended they get a plumber. Plumber ran the camera, and sure enough, it looked like that pipe I just showed you with the bottom all rotted out. And I thought, oh my God, this deal is going to blow apart. But there was some brilliant out-of-the-box thinking here, and I'll tell you what happened. I believe the seller's son was an attorney. They kept this deal together. And from what I understand, it was something like this. The seller provided a $10,000 credit to the buyer, but the seller filed an insurance claim. And I'm not an insurance expert or an attorney. I don't advocate it, but I really do believe they did not know they had a problem until they saw the damage that we showed them, because they looked very surprised. They filed a homeowner's insurance claim based on this leak, and they assigned the claim to the buyer. They were legally allowed to do that by the terms of their insurance. And they went to closing, and they closed, and that seller moved on. That buyer took control of the house, repiped the house, spent like $20,000 cutting the floors and repiping. But then they went and did all the stuff they were going to do anyway. They put in new flooring, painted, they put in new windows. And it is my understanding that about 6 or 8 months later, something like that, that claim settled and that buyer got a check for somewhere around $80,000. I thought, wow, what a win-win. That seller was going to have that issue if they moved on. That buyer wanted that neighborhood. They were probably going to be looking at another 60s or early 70s home. So they kept the deal together. I give that to you to put in your toolbox. It's not going to work all the time, or maybe even not a lot of the time, but it's something to know when you run across cast iron that, not out of the box thinking. So that concludes all the info I have. The last slide, ask about the type of plumbing you have in a house. Try to understand that and look for signs, possible signs. But finally, I like to say you don't get what you expect. Oh, you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. And I'm absolutely humbled and honored to present to you today. We ran a little over about 8 minutes. I thank you for your patience. I'm going to stay on. If you guys have any questions, I'm here for as long as you got questions. I'm here for you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You should be able to, or just chat them in, and I'm sure John would be happy to answer anything you got.
Tommy, as we discussed earlier before the presentation started, in order to get emails to the attendees to send in the super agent field guide, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, if anybody wants to receive that guide, I'm sure it'll be very useful to you. Go ahead and chat your emails into the chat, just so they have it and they can send that out to you.
Thank you, that would be wonderful. If not, I can send it to the broker for the office. You think he would be able to distribute it?
You can also send it to me, and then if anybody reaches out, I can provide it to them.
That would
so
be
I'll go ahead and I'll
wonderful.
put my email into the chat as well.
Thank you.
We'd love to serve you guys for your inspection needs, for you or your clients. Feel free to contact us regarding any of that, anything we can do for you.
And I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention the whole time. I just had some other stuff to do. I don't know if you covered anything in regards to like the current situation with COVID and all that, and how you guys are operating under that.
We did not. It's a changed world.
If you want to address it.
Yeah. Internally and externally. I mean, internally, you guys don't care much what we're doing, but everybody works on a voice over IP phone. Our entire client care team is not in the office. One person comes in for a client care team, the other 6 are at home. We're all working remotely. I'm in the office. But as far as the inspectors go, we, as the CDC and the state changed their guidelines, we updated their guidelines. Of course, we have a informational, when we book an inspection, there's an informational packet that tells them what we're doing and what the expectations are for the home when we get there, as far as social distancing. And then we've taken a couple of classes. All the inspectors took a couple of classes. One in particular from Internachi about how to, what to do, as far as appropriateness and procedures for hygiene. And then of course we have PPE. We have masks. We have face shields. We have gloves. We have booties. We have disinfectant, and most importantly, it's judgment, right? Inspectors trained on judgment and appropriateness, right? Just being wherewithal where you are going into a home, so as not to put them at harm or put them at risk or put yourself at risk. And we're just continually monitoring these changes. It became evident early on that we were an essential service. I was wondering about that. But people can't bind insurance and they can't close deals and they can't write title. It's like all of a sudden we're still getting calls, because there were deals trickling. And I was like, well, I guess, we need to serve our clients. How are we going to do this, So some of the guys sat on the sidelines. They weren't comfortable. The ones that were comfortable got screened and got trained, and, and more of the guys have come back. And last week was the first week that our volume of inspections was up to this week. Last year, we were down as much as 80%, down 80% in the depth of April, and kind of climbed back like 5% a month until last week. So seems to be residential real estate is exploding right about now, it seems like. So
I would agree. Yeah, everything's kind of ever changing at this point.
Yeah.
But it looks like you guys did get some email contacts in there. It looks like we also had one more question come in. Chet asked, do you recommend a seller to pay for an inspection prior to going to market?
Yes, so it's a pre-sale inspection. We do quite a bit of those. We do recommend it. We don't do all the insurance things. We do a general inspection geared towards the seller to tell them about the things so they can choose to deal with them the way they, you want to deal with them. We think it's a great idea as opposed to sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich, right? Because handling we found that just a few little things. I mean, a residential real estate transaction is very emotional, right? We know that. So the cleaner the report, the few things, the better it is. So, and then what we found is they'll take the report that we give them and they'll literally staple it to the disclosure statement. And whether they fix a few things or if there's nothing on it or they remedy a few or they do nothing, it kind of takes all that stuff off the table, and it's gone. So we've seen a high degree of success with that. I hope that answered the question.
Yep, thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, speak now. Otherwise, again, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, everybody there at Allied. Really appreciate this as always. If I get any inquiries, I'll be sure to send out that package if you want to go ahead and forward that to me. Otherwise, everybody else have a great day. John, thank you so much again. Have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tommy. We appreciate it.